The Lord of the Rings is the definitive nerd Bible of all time. We worship it and praise its glory every chance we get, and we don't do it without good reason either. This seminal and genre-defining work of high fantasy has influenced and continues to inspire millions of fans globally. The depth and layers that Tolkien has created within the stories set in Arda have yet to be matched even today. From creating entire races with their own defined culture, which includes history, architecture, and even language, nothing even comes close to it in terms of world building in a fantasy setting. While you've embarked with us through Middle-earth on a number of journeys in our past videos, today we're going to be delving into some of the earlier periods of this mythical land. The land of Arda is filled with creatures, good and evil, some more powerful and ancient than others. From the nameless things that dwell in the deep to the orcs that serve under the Dark Lord, evil has many faces in this world. The Tolkien legendarium is replete with them. In today's video, we're going to be discussing every single known Balrog of Morgoth that we know about in the Lord of the Rings and its extended universe. Balrogs are perhaps one of the most ancient creatures to exist in Middle-earth. They were originally Maiar, angelic beings who belonged to a tier below the mighty Valar. To put things into context, the Istar, like Gandalf and Saruman, along with even Sauron and Melian from the First Age, are all Maiar. So you can kind of get an idea about the type of power level we're dealing with here. In the early days of Morgoth, during his fall from grace, he saw many of these Maiar join him. By doing so, they were corrupted by the fallen Valar and took on the form of demons cloaked in flame and shadow that wielded whips and swords. They would serve as leaders or shock troopers for Morgoth's forces, and even in the First Age, when the might of elves and men was far greater than it is now, they proved to be overwhelmingly powerful foes. Over the course of his life, Tolkien constantly tinkered with the Balrogs, mainly regarding their number and characteristics, but their role in several key moments of the lore is undeniable. From the sacking of Gondolin in the First Age to dueling Gandalf and pursuing the Fellowship in the Third Age, they have long terrorized the denizens of Middle-earth. So strap in as we go through the history books of Middle-earth to explore the most fearsome of these demons of shadow and flame, the Balrogs of Morgoth. Before we get into our explanation, however, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Gothmog. To kick things off, let's begin by talking about Gothmog. This monster is perhaps the second most famous Balrog in Tolkien's Legendarium. He was the strongest Balrog to have existed and was considered to be the commander and lord of all Balrogs. Gothmog was a terror on the battlefield and was capable of laying waste to large swaths of enemies on his own. To put things into perspective, he was considered a high captain of Angband and one of the chief lieutenants of Morgoth during the First Age. During this period of time, his feats of strength and achievements far outclassed even that of the second Dark Lord, Sauron. One of the biggest and most important achievements of Gothmog was his slaying of Fëanor, arguably the most important character during the First Age of Middle-earth. The forces of Morgoth waylaid Fëanor and his fellow Noldor elves after they had chased the fallen Valar to Middle-earth to bring him to justice for stealing the Silmarils. The Silmarillion were the greatest and most beautiful jewels to ever have been crafted in all the realms. They contained within them the light of the two trees which Ungoliant and Morgoth had destroyed. These jewels were the work of Fëanor, the greatest smith to have ever lived and the grandfather of Celebrimbor, the one who would forge the Rings of Power. Upon their arrival in Middle-earth, Morgoth would unleash his forces upon them, but the elves were too strong and pushed the forces of Morgoth back. Fëanor, being arrogant, chose to pursue these orcs when he was caught in an ambush by the Balrogs. It was then, despite the elves' valiant efforts, that Gothmog would inflict multiple wounds on the Master Smith and eventually take his life. His second most important feat was when he appeared as the captain of Morgoth's forces in the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, or the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. This was one of the biggest and most important battles of the First Age, and Gothmog would once again show the world why Morgoth considered him to be one of his chief servants. During this battle, Gothmog would slay the Noldor High King Fingon. The High King would give Gothmog a great challenge, but would eventually fall when another Balrog would wound the Elf Lord from behind with his whip. Taking advantage of this momentary opening, Gothmog would hew Fingon down with his battle axe. It was in this battle that he also captured Hurin, the titular character of the Children of Hurin novel and the greatest warrior amongst men. His final noteworthy act would come during the siege of Gondolin, where he would again lead the forces of Morgoth in battle. Gondolin was a hidden elven city that that had survived for more than 400 years. It was deemed to be nigh impregnable because its secrets were guarded under the pain of death. Morgoth, however, would discover it through the betrayal of the one known as Maglin, who, coveting the power that Morgoth offered, along with the promise of getting the king's daughter, would lead the enemies straight to the Hidden Realm. Gothmog would lead his fellow Balrogs and be responsible for breaking through to the city, allowing the rest of his forces to enter and lay waste to the city. This is also where the dreaded ancient demon would finally meet his end. Upon encountering Ecthelion, a mighty elf lord, they would engage in a fierce duel, with each giving no quarter to the other. The elf lord would be severely wounded and disarmed during the battle with the Balrog. With all hope seemingly lost as Gothmog moved in for the kill, Ecthelion, with one final burst of strength, impaled the Balrog through the chest with the spiked part of his helm and, with his last remaining strength, pushed him into the Fountain of the Kings. There, the fires of Gothmog would be extinguished, and both the mighty elf and the Lord of the Balrogs would perish together. Thus, the world would be rid of one of the greatest evils to ever walk upon it. Targaroth. This particular Balrog is from the acclaimed video game Middle-earth: Shadow of War. Targaroth was the second in command of Gothmog during the First Age of Middle-earth. Along with Gothmog, he was one of the oldest creatures in Morgoth's service. He would take part in all the important events of the First Age alongside his infernal kin. Targaroth would outlive his commander Gothmog and fight in the War of Wrath against the hosts of Valar. During the battle, he would be thrown into the fiery pits of Gorgoroth by Carnan, a spirit of the forest. There, he would slumber for eons all through the Second Age and would finally awake in the Third Age as evil began creeping into his resting place, now called Mordor. In order to sway the Balrog to his side, Sauron orders his chief necromancer Zog to parley with the monster, but it proves too powerful for the orc. Despite the efforts of Celebrimbor, Talion, and Carnan, the Balrog fully awakens and begins its rampage once more after an entire age. He slaughters all the acolytes who hastened his awakening and starts killing everything from Gorgoroth to Saragost. The three heroes engage this monster over a frozen lake where Carnan, by expending her life force, manages to plunge the fiery demon into the lake, quenching its eternal flames and killing Targaroth once and for all. Thorlo. Thorlo was yet another powerful Balrog who was too strong to be killed outright during the First Age. Like Targaroth, he too fought in the War of Wrath, and like many of Morgoth's evil servants, would escape after their masters fell to some of the deepest and darkest parts of the earth. In Thorlo's case, he would escape to a place known as the Rift of Nerz-Gashu, but unlike some of his other compatriots, he wouldn't be so lucky as to dodge his pursuers so easily. After evading the elf sorceress Galadriel, who considered the Balrog her arch nemesis for close to a millennia, he would finally face her in combat and be defeated. However, instead of slaying the demon, Lothiriel, along with the two blue wizards, decides to imprison him so that he can wait for his judgment until Dagor Dagorath. This is Tolkien's version of Ragnarok from Norse mythology, where a great battle will be fought at the end of all days as Melkor would be freed from his prison. After the end of the battle, Eru Ilúvatar would lay down his final judgment for everyone, including Thorlo. However, by the end of the Third Age, the seals to his prison seemed to have weakened considerably, and as such, it fell into the hands of adventurers to seek him out and finally put an end to his threat. Thorlo is a raid boss in the popular Lord of the Rings online MMORPG game. Ungorthan. After looking at two of these demons of fire and shadow from other media besides the books, we're back with one that is definitely mentioned by J.R.R. Tolkien himself. Ungorthan was another Balrog of the First Age who held the title of Lord of Balrogs. Even though much of his history and lore is steeped in mystery, there's still a fair bit we can infer from what was written about this abyssal creature. Due to this, and his title as Lord of Balrogs, many speculate that Ungorthan is just another name for Gothmog. However, Christopher Tolkien, the author's son, who went on to publish a number of his father's works, believe that they're two different creatures. This is because the name Gothmog appeared in Tolkien's work and manuscripts much earlier than Ungorthan, and it also appears in his final works separately. It is therefore believed that Ungorthan was in fact the second in command to Gothmog, and though he too held the title of Lord of Balrogs, he was the weaker of the two. Ungorthan is speculated to have taken part in all of the conflicts that Gothmog was present in, including the sacking of Gondolin and the Nerneath Arnoediad. We know that he helped Gothmog slay the Elven High King Fingon by hurting and tying the Elven King's limbs from behind with his whip, thereby allowing Gothmog to finish Fingon off. In some of the earlier versions of Tolkien's work, he's also called the Thane of Morgoth. The fate of Lungorthin isn't clear, as you might have already guessed. There are a number of possibilities as to what could have happened to him. Some speculate that he perished in the War of Wrath along with most of the other Balrogs. There are others who believe that the unnamed Balrog that the elf warrior Glorfindel slew during the fall of Gondolin was none other than Lungorthin. It's even said by some that Lungorthin survived well into the Third Age and came to be known as Durans Bane. No matter what his fate was, Lungorthin was one of the most terrifying creatures to roam the lands of Arda. Durans Bane. While not at the same power levels as Gothmog, this Balrog, simply known as Durans Bane, is perhaps the most famous of them all. Even if you're just a casual fan of the Lord of the Rings universe, his presence is inescapable. Yes, we're talking about the Balrog that Gandalf and the Fellowship fight in the Mines of Moria. He's also the Balrog that we're most likely to see in Amazon Studios' Lord of the Rings Rings of Power TV show. While we know him as the Balrog that dueled Gandalf to the death, which resulted in the latter returning as the White Wizard, there are quite a few things outside of that, including his name, that we're going to be discussing now. It's believed that, like many of its kindred, after the death of Morgoth during the War of Wrath, Durans Bane went into hiding. Unbeknownst to all, it fled all the way from the now sunken Beleriand to the depths of the Misty Mountains. There, it lay dormant for the entire Second Age and the early years of the Third Age. It would only be reawakened when, in the year 1980 of the Third Age, the dwarves would dig too deep, greedily searching for the precious metal known as mithril. The Balrog would slay King Durin VI that year and soon slay the king's son, Nain I, as well a year later. This would cause the dwarves to finally abandon their ancient kingdom and become refugees. The dwarves would also give the Balrog its name, Durans Bane, around this time. Thrain II would catch a glimpse of Durans Bane after the Battle of Azanal-Bazar, where the dwarves would finally avenge Thror and kill Azog the Defiler. When the rest of his warriors were eager to press their advantage, having killed the Great Orc to reclaim their lost kingdom, Thrain would hold them back, having seen the Balrog lurking deep within Moria. It would next leave its mark on the history of Middle-earth when the Fellowship of the Ring, having failed to traverse the treacherous mountain pass of Caradhras, decided to travel through Khazad-dûm. At the tail end of their journey, the Balrog would appear and begin pursuing them. Legolas and Gandalf would be the first to spot it, and Gimli would recognize it as Durans Bane. Gandalf would engage the mighty Balrog in a duel where he would destroy the creature's sword. The wizard would then smite the bridge on which the two were fighting, sending the fiery demon into the abyss, but just when the danger seemed to have passed, Durans Bane would lash out with its whip and drag the wizard down into the abyss with him. They would fall far into the abyss until they both fell into a subterranean lake. There, the Balrog's fires would be extinguished, and with it finally being somewhat weakened, though no less dangerous, Gandalf would begin gaining the upper hand. The Balrog would then flee through one of the many subterranean tunnels dug by the nameless things that dwell in the deep, with Gandalf in hot pursuit. The two would then emerge and begin climbing the endless stairs while battling, and finally, at the highest point, in a place called Durin's Chamber, Gandalf would smite the foul creature down against the side of the mountain and kill it. This is how Durans Bane, who had survived even the wrath of the Valar and 2 whole ages of Middle-earth, would finally perish. Marvelous verdict! The actual number of Balrogs in Tolkien's universe is not always clearly specified. In some sources, their number is as little as 7 to 10, while other sources state that there were many. We also don't know how many Balrogs survived from the First to Third Age, or if there were any others like Durans Bane still dormant in the hidden places of Middle-earth. Tolkien didn't really provide us with much information regarding that. It's also to be noted that when a Balrog dies, it's merely its physical form dying, very much like when Sauron dies several times in the lore, but always comes back. This is because, just like Sauron, Balrogs, as mentioned earlier, are Maiar as well. One possibility could be that having been corrupted by Morgoth, they could have lost their ability to take on different forms. But then, by this logic, Sauron should have also lost this ability. The Dark Lord loses this ability only when he's poured most of his power and life force into the One Ring. Well, we know that when the Eldar and the Edain die, their souls depart to the halls of Mandos, where they await their rebirth. We're not told what will happen to the souls of of the Valar and Maiar if they perish. We know that the Valars cannot truly be killed, as Morgoth is merely chained up in the void, and since Maiar are similar to Valars, just of a lesser stature, the same can be true for them. Regardless, it's safe to assume that these fallen angels are waiting for the Day of Judgment, which will arrive after the Dagor Daggorath, when Eru Ilúvatar will judge all of creation. For now though, we're afraid we've come to the end of this video. We had a really great time making this one, talking about some of the most powerful evil entities that walk the lands of Middle-earth. The Balrog might be evil, but they're also really freaking cool. We've got more videos on our channel where we cover everything related to Lord of the Rings. Also, be on the lookout for a deep dive video on the Balrogs as a whole on our channel if this video piques your interest regarding these ancient demons. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This is Wizard Wheezy signing off for now, but we'll catch you in our next video. Until next time, stay safe and stay marvelous.